So I just got my first real punch to the face. About a month ago, I took part in the New York City Midnight Short Story Challenge, which was basically write a 2,000-word short story in a week based on a genre, a character, and a theme that are given to you. I was given romantic comedy, cosplay, and fashion designer. So not really in the breadth of what I usually write. And you're put up against, in this specific instance, it was about 30 other writers who have the same challenge, the same genre, the same character, all that. So I submitted that about a month ago. I'd honestly forgotten most about it until yesterday. I get an email about the challenge, and if you write well enough and you're selected by the judges, you get to move on to the next round. And the email I got told me that I did not move on to the next round. And it's not a fun thing to find out. Are y'all crossing? Or so many children. If I'd let those kids cross, it would have taken me an hour. So definitely not something you wish to hear. You get feedback from this, even if your story isn't chosen. So in the next day or so, I should hear something back. It's my first real rejection as a writer so far. I started writing fiction almost exclusively back in September, then started the novel in November. So I haven't yet encountered that. I've submitted things since then, but this is the first sort of response I get out of the things I've submitted. And yeah, it hit a lot harder than I thought it would, and I just sort of shut down after that and just went to bed. Granted, it was about midnight, but I was supposed to do some editing after that, and I just didn't do it. I just felt like this. I felt like the foundations were shaken from under me. I mean, I'd been calling myself a writer this whole time, and I've been writing, and I'm writing all day, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Of course, one of the first short stories you write isn't necessarily going to be the best one, and I knew this one wasn't the best work that I've done. This one wasn't my best work. But you still sort of expect that. I don't know what I expected. It's like when I first started doing auditions for acting, the first few times I didn't nail the audition. I felt this similar way where I just sort of shut down and don't really want to do anything anymore. But I've gotten better at it. I've gotten better at handling. Okay, we get it, bro, you vape. I've gotten better at handling those rejections, but it's like with writing, either because it was not something I'd experienced yet, or because maybe I take writing more seriously, I'm not sure. It hit just as hard as those first auditions. Maybe that means that I will get better at handling it, and I hope I do, because I'm aware that I have lots of rejection left in my future still. It kind of goes to show that even if you try to prepare yourself for these things, it's just not doable. You can't prepare yourself for that. I gotta admit, I was really bummed when I was assigned romantic comedy. I sort of knew in that moment that I wasn't going to move on, because I don't write comedy, let alone romance, and mash the two together, and I'm sure I would have done better if I'd had horror or fantasy or literally anything. But yeah, literally anything that doesn't involve romance. But I think it's easy to sort of blame these external factors for the outcome, and I have to sort of refocus on what I could have done differently. I mean, I spent a ton of time on it, but it's not like I spent all the time I could have on it. And maybe I could have spent more time editing. There's just more I could have done, I think. I refuse to think that it was impossible for me to move on. I think if I'd spent more time writing it, spent more time editing it, maybe researched the genre a little bit more, I could probably have moved on. Maybe that's why the rejection hurt so much, because I internalize it as all these things that I could have done better. I don't know. Everyone gets rejected at one point or another, and it sucks for everybody. There's nothing special about this one. But out of that rejection, there was some good that came out of it. I've sort of flipped it to a place where I'm just going to work even harder on the novel and everything else I write, so that whoever decided to reject that story will realize that they missed out. It's a little bit vindictive, but it's the best way to go forward. Case in point, I usually wake up about an hour before I have to head to work, so that I can get some writing and editing done before. And usually I'm pretty bad about it, where, like, for example, I put my alarm on at 8:15 and I'm usually only up at about 9. Just sort of wasting time laying in bed and so on. This morning my alarm rang and I was up at 8:15, put on some pajama pants, the uniform of the true writer, and sat at my computer and started editing. And I got an hour of editing done before doing anything else in my day. It's kind of like people who are really into fitness, who work out first thing in the morning and they get that done and out of the way. That's kind of how I want writing to be for me. I want to, even if I can't get all of it out of the way, get a good chunk of it done. And this morning was one of the few mornings where I actually managed to do that. I actually managed to wake up when I'm supposed to wake up and get the writing done. And it went by like that. There's some times where you're editing and you're sort of looking at the clock like, how much time do I have left? I want to do something else. But this morning I was 100% focused on it. I think maybe what that's showing me is I need to get punched in the face a bunch more, because then when I get back up, I'm more determined to hit back. To get back at them means to basically show them that I'm better than they think I am by becoming that. Because I might not be as good as I want, or I might not be good enough right now to get something published by them, but eventually I will be, because I'm going to keep working at this. Writers are notorious for, or maybe artists in general, are notorious for having the crisis of faith very often, where not only do they question all their life choices, but they also question whether they're even headed in the right direction, or even they have the right to do what they're doing. And as a writer, I've had a bunch of those where something happens and it sort of shakes everything up and makes me reconsider everything. I don't think I would have actually given up writing, but it is a bit scary to be shaken so hard by one rejection. And going forward, I definitely need to toughen myself up and deal with these better. I was able to flip it and use it for my benefit this time, but I've got to watch out and keep an eye out for the next ones that happen, because there's going to be more. And this one was, a challenge where there was, cash involved, which I lost out on, but it's not like the novel. Like, I spent a week on that story. Like, this novel I've spent 5 months of my life on now. Like, if I do decide to go with traditional publishing, which I'm still not sure about, the first rejection for the novel is going to hit hard. So, until then, I think, I was thinking already about editing 6 days a week and then writing 1 day a week. Partially because I still want to work on the craft, and maybe because I also want to get away from the editing for at least a day. I want to write more short stories, try different genres, explore characters, and so on. But I think as part of that, what I need to do going forward is submit more and more stories, get a pile of rejections so I get that out of the way and I'm used to this feeling and I can handle it better. Because I think I was in a pretty good place last night, so when a rejection hit, it just made me shut down for the evening. But I can imagine that if it's like the 5th one in a row and I'm not doing too well already, maybe I'll shut down for a week or so, and that's a lot of lost time to make up for. It might seem counterintuitive to actively chase after failure. People who succeed are just people who are more willing to fail and who fail more, but also fail better. Because they're not just failing and they're not just letting that cripple them, they're using failure to drive them and teach them. Learn from your mistake. And it's very cliche, but I think cliches often have at least a small nugget of truth in them. From editing, I've noticed that I've grown a lot as a writer since November, and I can only imagine how much more growth will happen if I keep failing. If I actively seek out challenges that push my boundaries and encourage failure in a way, then there's only two ways from there. I can either let those failures beat me into a state of despair, or I can use them to keep climbing. I don't know what the future looks like. Not a prophet. The best thing I can do is to keep failing and use those failures to propel myself forwards. I mean, the only other option is to give up, and that means so many different things that I don't even want to think about giving up. It took me a while to finally get punched in the face. I'm always going to have these doubts and these thoughts that are going to nag at me. I'm always going to wonder if I'm meant to be a writer and if I'm doing the right thing. Those probably never go away. But the best way to prove to yourself that you're not a writer is to stop writing. If I let my failures get to me, that's what's going to happen. I'm just going to end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe that's why people give up. Maybe that's why failures hurt us so much. They feel like these things that were meant to happen, these things that bring about some foregone conclusion that we don't see any way out of. But I've never been much of a believer in destiny. I don't think things are predetermined. I think that if you do what you got to do to get to where you want to be, you're going to get there. As a writer, that means you have to keep writing, keep showing the stuff you write to people, keep getting criticized, keep getting punched in the mouth. And eventually from there you become better and get to a place where you make a living out of it. I don't know what that road looks like right now, but I know how to walk it.